One final game of the NFL Week 10 slate here to kick off the second half of this season on a Monday night inside SoFi Stadium out in Los Angeles. It's the Rams playing host to the Miami Dolphins. 2.5-point spread now in favor of LA. It was closer to a point and a hook earlier this week. Over under at 48.5, expecting two offenses to fill it up on this Monday night. DRS, you see the numbers there. Where do you start your handicap for the Monday night finale of week number 10?
Towards the Rams, because you're taking a look at two football teams. And by the way, maybe you sort of upgrade the loss for the Dolphins going up against the Cardinals. You can't lose that game. You lost it close to the Cardinals. That's embarrassing. Cardinals look like they're a decent football team right now, but at the same time, you have one team with the Rams with a victory, Ben, gets them to over 500, and you have right in the crosshairs that NFC West, which you can actually win. The Miami Dolphins, I don't think they're going anywhere this season, and that was a close loss, but a defeating loss where you figure you win that game, you can catapult yourselves, and it looks like all for naught. But do I expect Tua Tagovailoa to have a solid game tonight? Do I expect Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to show up on the outside? Yes, I do. But if I'm giving the nod, I look at that line, it's a little bit disrespectful towards the Rams. They're the home team. I think they're the better team and the better defense. Matthew Stafford has a pretty good night tonight. I think they pick up the victory, and I think the right side tonight is on those Rams at home.
Yeah, DRS, I would have to agree. The Rams defense getting healthier and improving. The offensive line has been shored up. And we didn't see a lot of Puka Nakua last week against Seattle because he was ejected for a phantom punch early in the opening half. And then it was all Cooper Kupp. You would think with both guys fully healthy, like we saw a little bit on that short week Thursday night game against Minnesota, that LA could be very potent against the Dolphins defense that has been lackluster this year. They did allow 30 points last week to Buffalo. And Donnie, that's really kind of where you start for Miami. This is a 2-6 football team that, of course, the main story this year for the Fins has been the health and the status of Tua Tagovailoa. And there is no doubt that with Tua back in the lineup, this Dolphins team is dramatically better. The offense looks really good. They had not scored more than 20 points until week number 8 in Tua's return. They had scored 27 in 2 consecutive weeks. The offense is so much better. Tua has thrown for at least 230. He has played clean football, 3 total touchdowns in his 2 games since returning off the IR. But, Donnie, it's also come in 2 losses now, where the Dolphins season is on the brink at 2-6, and they have been the underdog in both of those games. Or they were the favorite, actually, slightly against Arizona, but the underdog last week against Buffalo, they covered okay. They did not win outright. And so that's the final point I want to make toward the trend. Miami with Mike McDaniel, since he became the head coach in South Florida in 2022, an underdog 18 times, 7-11 against the spread, not great. But what's even more damning for this Dolphins team that is trying to hold on to a sliver of hope that maybe there's an outside shot of a wild card berth, they are just 3-14 straight up as an underdog. It is the second fewest wins outright for any team in the NFL that has been booked as an underdog double-digit times in the last 2.5 years. And really, that's the story for Miami. Not keep the game close and look better, but actually win one outright.
Yeah, get some defensive stops. That's what you're looking for, because the issue not with the Miami Dolphins is they're healthy now. Wide receivers are healthy. Running backs are healthy. Offensive line is decent. Tua Tagovailoa healthy. Back-to-back games where you tell me right now, Ben, I'm an NFL coach. All right, you don't know the final score, but I'll tell you scored 27 in back-to-back games. You're no worse than 1-1, and you're probably 2-0, and the Miami Dolphins with Tua Tagovailoa back, zeros on the board. And you take a look at those games versus the Cardinals, which is a loss. It's always like you fought the Bills right up to the end. What a pass. Like a 60-yarder to end that game. You were right in that to the end. But those are demoralizing losses where, yes, they're football players. They play for a paycheck. They're going to be ready to play tonight. But wouldn't you be more ready to play if you're 6-2 than 2-6 at this point? We can understand that. The Rams know it's ahead of them. And quite frankly, so do the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins aren't making the playoffs, but we do have a clean environment. It's turf. 2 teams with some speed merchants on both sides here. Good running backs, good quarterbacks, and good wide receivers. We should be getting points tonight. We're not on a Thursday night where I usually say, like, hey, you know what? Quick week here, banged up players. And Puka Nakua, who was dealing with that knee injury, probably almost good for him getting thrown out early in that game because he didn't take that wear and tear. We should be looking at some weapons tonight to get after it.
3 straight wins for LA. They have covered in the last 2. Of course, they resurrected their season with 2 wins in a 5-day span that ended with that short week game against Minnesota. They had some extended time off last week. They beat Seattle on the road in overtime. Despite not a great offensive effort, they hold on to win. They picked off Geno Smith 3 times, and now more extended rest to get even healthier. We'll continue to preview Monday Night Football when our third and final hour starts up next here on TEL. Welcome to hour number 3, live right here on the early line to start off this new week. It is a Monday morning. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. Our third and final hour, we preview week number 10's finale on this Monday night in Los Angeles between the Rams and the Dolphins. We hear from you. We get the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chow's analysis, a look back on the injuries from the Sunday slate as well, the prop perspective with Tom Vecchio, a couple of basketball handicaps. Sounds like a pretty good third and final hour to me.
Love Mondays. You know this about it. Like, we get drained this weekend from all the excitement Saturday, Sunday, late nights watching football games. We got to perform on Mondays, but it makes it so much easier when the topics just write themselves and we can fill in the blanks. So we're ready for an action-packed third hour, getting some help from some guests here. Away we go. Exciting times. 2 hours down, 1 to go.
Absolutely so, DRS. And to end out week number 10, which of course begins the second half of this NFL season, week 10 comes to a conclusion tonight in the City of Angels. Inside SoFi Stadium, the Rams play host to the Miami Dolphins. The Rams have won 3 straight games to get back to 500 to stay in the playoff chase in the NFC. If Miami has anything left, of course, it has not been an easy season in South Florida with the injuries to Tua Tagovailoa. It needs to start tonight for the Dolphins as an underdog. But we wanted to hear from the people and how they were approaching this Monday night finale. We do that now with all of you in Fade the Public. What is the best bet for Monday Night Football? The question to all of you at SportsGrid. The Rams as just a 2.5-point home favorite. The Dolphins getting 2.5 as the underdog. Rather lofty total, but a primetime game. It's not a short week, and it's an extended week for both. 48.5 is that over-under. More people like the over in some scoring tonight than the under, but most people, Donnie, more than 44% now back in the Rams, laying 2.5 points at home to end out week number 10.
We got it right today. We really did. Now, granted, the ultimate contrarian play would be the Dolphins. You take a look at some of those lines out there, 50 to 60% of the tickets coming in here on the Rams, and that line not moving here because that's a key number of 3 to push through. And you also have a team fighting for the division because it's a team that's just fighting for some respect. I agree, though. The public is taking the right point of view. It's hard to win games on the road in the NFL as is, but I truly believe the Rams are the better football team overall than the Miami Dolphins if we combine offense and defense, and certainly where they're playing the football game tonight, which is in LA. So I agree, 44%, I'm with you here. I'll back the public tonight because I voted for the Rams at -2.5, Ben.
Yeah, I would agree, DRS. Again, the Rams have won 3 straight. They have covered in their last 2. Both of those 2 covers against the Vikings on the short week Thursday at home as a slight underdog. Last Sunday as a slight favorite in Seattle against the Seahawks. So competitive games expected. The Rams, in some form or fashion, have come out on the winning end. DRS, the Dolphins, as we have shared, an underdog last week on the road in Western New York against Buffalo. They cover as a hefty dog, but they do not win outright. Just 3-14 straight up as an underdog with Mike McDaniel. It's not great. Only 3 outright victories in that span. 3-15, excuse me. And Donnie, when you're booked as an underdog, you're not expected to win outright necessarily, but you would expect a couple of upsets, at least with a talented playoff team in those previous 2 years, 7-11 against the number. But for the Dolphins, trying to hold on to hope for an outside shot at the postseason, it's not just keeping this game close, it's winning outright. Let's get to that total, 48.5. Just how much offense do we see tonight in Los Angeles?
It's going to be up to the Miami Dolphins, because I don't think the defense is all that good, but we always talk about, Ben, the key term running mate here. I think you have a pretty good running mate. Matthew Stafford can sling it. Sean McVay is one of the best offensive play callers in the NFL. Mike McDaniel has all his toys again on the field and healthy. There's no reason to believe that we're expecting a ground game tonight that's going to control both sides, but you do have two electric running backs that can hit home runs. Kyron Williams is sensational, maybe one of the least talked about really good running backs in the NFL. We all know about Devon Achane and also Raheem Mostert. So you're looking from pound for pound, right? You have the wide receivers, you have the offensive lines, you have the quarterbacks, you have the running backs here. And also, you don't have two great defenses by any measure. Maybe this game is going to be told on that young defensive line for the Los Angeles Rams as it's really starting to come into his own to get pressure on Tua Tagovailoa in the pocket. If they can't, we're on turf. It's going to be fast. We're not worried about any weather conditions. Why can't we see 50 points in this game? Both of these teams are capable of getting into the 20s, which puts you right in the shot to hit that total.
Tua Tagovailoa has been great in his return. He hasn't thrown for a ton of yardage, just 231 and 234, but he only has 13 total incompletions in his last two outings, only 3 last week, efficient against the Buffalo Bills. 3 touchdowns, has not thrown an interception, sacked just once in either of those 2 games. Matthew Stafford, though, as the Rams have now won 3 straight, and with Puka Nakua and Cooper Kupp at least in the starting lineup in their last 2, 279 against the Vikings, 4 touchdowns, 298 and 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks last weekend. Donnie, if you had to pick one of these 2 quarterbacks to target tonight, who would you look at?
It's a great call because, again, I'm sort of in the mix with both of them because I think they have both ones. But if I expect, again, sometimes it's just paint by numbers. If the Miami Dolphins, I'm not too sure they could win this game, but I do know they'll probably be in the 20s. It's probably Tua Tagovailoa because the ability to hit the home run. Now, Cooper Kupp is a great wideout. Not necessarily I'm going to beat you for 65 to 70 yards. Puka Nakua, unbelievable body control, almost like a George Pickens of the West Coast, if you will. You throw it in his vicinity, he's going to come down with that catch. But the ability to have one play-action pass on your own 25-yard line with, Tyreek Hill on one side and on the other side, Jalen Waddle, it's probably Tua Tagovailoa. If you said, Donnie, which quarterback has a better chance to throw for 2 touchdowns tonight? I'm probably going to go Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, listen, I would agree. Both are at 1.5, a slight bit of over or a slight bit of juice on the over. I might do what I did for Monday night or Thursday night, rather, for Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, both quarterbacks to throw for at least 2 passing scores. I could see that tonight. Now, Devon Achane, since Tua Tagovailoa's return, 2 receiving touchdowns and a rushing score last week against Buffalo. That's 3 total touchdowns. Kyron Williams did not score last week, but had scored in 10 consecutive games for this Rams team. And you can see, DRS, what his odds are to hit Pater. When we look at these 2 backs, they are going to factor in to the offense in huge ways. And again, both heavily favored, Kyron Williams more so than Achane, to hit Pater.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to both of them, but if I have to choose one, you're certainly going to take that price point and say minus 210 makes the most sense because there is no other lead dog on that team. You might see Mostert get a couple of those carries and steal touchdowns, which is frustrating when you get vultured, where Achane might do a lot of work and get a little bit of a breather inside the red zone. That doesn't happen for Kyron Williams. He's also a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So I'll cheat on this one. Instead of saying the minus 105 is the way I want to go, obviously the minus 210 makes way more sense because if you said forget about the price points, who's scoring tonight, it's Kyron Williams for me.
No wide receiver props listed for Miami, at least Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Again, the offense has been better. Tyreek yet to score since that opening game of the season or in Tua Tagovailoa's return. Now, here's the interesting component, DRS, as we look at the other side. If Puka Nakua and Cooper Kupp play a fully healthy game together, how do they share the distribution? They have not played a ton of snaps together in Puka's career the last year and a half. In that first game against Minnesota, it was Puka Nakua. 9 targets, 7 grabs, more than 100 yards. Last week, Nakua dealing with a knee injury early, but that wasn't why he left. He got ejected for what they called a punch. It didn't really look like a vicious punch to me. So then Cooper Kupp, 11 grabs on 14 targets and more than the century mark as well. How do you approach the Rams wideouts for Monday night?
It's fantastic. Again, it's such a good problem to have when you're like a same game player parlay type guy, because it's not an all or one at this point. If Puka Nakua is injured, yeah, you're all in on Cooper Kupp. But when Nakua is out there along with Kupp, I tend to lean towards Nakua. I think the bigger plays can happen from that direction as opposed to the target monster Cooper Kupp.
And you see the yardage and the receptions props. They're very similar entering Monday night. The prop perspective on this Monday was Sports Grid's Tom Vecchio to set the stage for the Monday night finale in Los Angeles between the Rams and the Dolphins. Vecchio, as always, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here. How was the weekend looking back on the Sunday slate around the NFL?
Thanks for having me. It was a good weekend overall, hit on a couple of touchdowns. I was on the Lions last night. They didn't obviously come through in terms of covering the spread, but their late comeback did stage a spot for me to pick up some SGPs, which was nice. Hopefully that will carry over into tonight's game. I think we're in for an awesome one tonight. Obviously, the news of Tyreek Hill, I think, plays one of the key components for tonight. So let's roll.
Yeah, absolutely, Vecchio, because right now, no wide receiver props out for the Dolphins. The tight end, Jonnu Smith, a couple of the backs,
DK,
including Devon.
On DK,
Tom Vecchio, you're on a beautiful. But hold on, Tom.
Wow.
Tom, you don't see the three box here, but on the bottom right corner, we have a beautiful logo of the FanDuel Sportsbook on this wonderful program that is the early line. So we don't talk about competitor sports books here on this program at the very least.
Nice to know you, Tom.
So
okay. we can roll.
Listen, on other wonderful Sports Grid shows, any book, shop the market, find the best number. At least here on the FanDuel sponsored show, we try to keep it to FD, but we'll dive through the rest of it, Vecchio, and learn the numbers. We can't, Vecchio, we're giving you a harder time than anything that is necessary. All right, as we look at the numbers for this game, though, competitive Monday night finale to end out week number 10. 2.5-point spread, Vecchio, in favor of the Rams at home in the City of Angels, total at 48.5. Rather high total, short spread. What are the numbers telling you about the flow of tonight's game in SoFi?
I'm going to be on the Rams, and I do think we will see some points tonight. What we have seen from the Dolphins defense, I think we need to take with a bit of a grain of salt when we're looking back at their schedule. They're playing the Colts, not a good offense. They're playing the Patriots. They're playing the Titans. Like some of these teams that, we're viewing as legitimately bottom tier teams overall. So when we see some of their numbers, when they're, relatively good against wide receivers overall, I don't think that's actually true. And I think we want to kind of lean on the Rams, a team that's clearly trending up as of now. They're getting healthier. And I want to be on the Rams. I want to be on the Rams for a lot of props. But again, that Tyreek Hill news does impact this game overall, because if he's not out there, if he's a decoy, if he's not 100%, whatever you want to call it, that's going to impact how much the Dolphins are going to be able to kind of, punch back in this game. And thus, that's going to impact what the Rams need to or have to do on offense. So while I like Kyron Williams and I like Puka Nakua tonight, at a certain point, they may not need to have 100 yards through the air for both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua, just because if the Dolphins can't get anything going on offense, this is going to be a ground game for Kyron Williams.
Let's take a look at those quarterbacks tonight. No shortage of talent. Matthew Stafford taking on Tua Tagovailoa. 250.5 for Matthew Stafford tonight as his passing yards prop. 244.5 for Tua Tagovailoa. The touchdown props here, both at 1.5 and both negative juice here. Minus 128 for Stafford. Tua at minus 114. Is it so simple, Tom, that you might have to wait a little bit longer to get some information on Tyreek Hill before you make a move? Or is it decided like, no, you don't really care about the injuries to Tyreek Hill per se, or is it just a Matthew Stafford night for you?
I think it is a Matthew Stafford night, and, the Tyreek Hill news, if you want to jump early, that's certainly fine. You just want to be in because you think even if he's out, Tua's going to have to pass the ball, right? Mm-hmm. And the Rams are going to be playing from ahead. They're going to be out not just by 2.5 points, they're going to be out by 6.5. Thus, the Dolphins have to pass the ball. So you can just jump on Tua now because they have to do it. I do like some passing touchdowns for Stafford, so I'm willing to go over on the 1.5. I'm willing to go over on the yards. The attempts thing is what I'm kind of struggling with, which is normally a market I like to go to for quarterbacks. But if Tyreek's not there, again, my point being, the Rams may not have to push out the entire game. They'll get up to a certain amount, and then it's going to be a Kyron Williams game. So I'm interested in Stafford's attempts prop, but I'm kind of waiting on that Tyreek news.
Stafford has thrown for at least 275 plus in the last 2 games for LA. Of course, 2 consecutive wins against the Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. I do want to ask you, Vecchio, despite the uncertainty around Tyreek Hill, about Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins offense, there has been no doubt that with Tua Tagovailoa returning to the lineup in the last 2 games, the offense has looked so much better. They had not scored more than 20 points in their first 6. They have scored at least 27. In fact, exactly 27 in each of their previous 2 games. How do you evaluate this Dolphins offense now with Tua Tagovailoa back under center?
Obviously, it elevates everyone around him. You know, one of the players, Devon Achane, I think, is going to be in for a big night, regardless if Tyreek Hill was fully healthy, right? There was no injury concern about him. I think we are going to see a little bit of pressure on Tua, and a lot of those passes for Achane should be there. I mean, he's a running back where the reception prop's sitting at 5.5, so he's going to be involved in the passing game. So you want to go to Achane as maybe the most consistent option overall. I think that's certainly an option. I tweeted about Jonnu Smith for a touchdown after the Tyreek Hill news was released, just because he does see a good red zone usage. He's actually tied for 3rd on the team. So if Tyreek Hill is out, we're going to see some other players step up, and I want to kind of jump on those numbers early.
Always tough to bet into somebody you think might have an injury issue, but Tyreek Hill, again, the wheels aren't the problem. It's a risk.
Right.
Now, he did take the flight out there. Looks to be a game-time decision. We'll see how much that's going to be effective. But sometimes just watching the pregame warm-ups and getting some feeds from the beat writer can help. But let me ask you this question. If Tyreek Hill does play, and let's just say he's a little bit of damaged goods, who picks up the scraps for the Dolphins at wide receiver?
It would be going to Jalen Waddle. I will also say, if Tyreek is injured and it's a wrist issue, I could see them drawing up plays where they get him coming out of the backfield, and then thus Tyreek rushing yards, which we do see at times, right? These little jet sweeps, or one of those little pitch plays, right? That they do, that Mahomes does to Kelsey, like those little kind of toss plays just to get the ball into his hands where he actually doesn't have to catch it. So then we can get Tyreek running. So maybe a combined rushing plus receiving for Tyreek. But then, of course, looking to Jalen Waddle, players kind of slow. I want to say slow in terms of production, but I've got to remember their offense wasn't cooking for however many weeks that Tua was out. So I'm interested in going to Jalen Waddle, but I actually do think there is some value in Tyreek props if he does play, but he may not be at 100%. Looking at combine for Tyreek could be the answer.
And again, when you look at Tyreek Hill and that touchdown price, he hasn't scored since the season opener. He has not found paydirt in any of the 2 games with Tagovailoa back in the lineup. Now let's get to the Rams wideout conversation. Puka Nakua is healthy. He is back. He was healthy last week dealing with a knee injury, but was ejected in the opening half for a punch in Seattle. So it was all Cooper Kupp. Vecchio, these 2 guys have not played a lot together on the same field in Nakua's year and a half in the NFL. If they both are healthy and they are both out there for the entirety of the game tonight, how do you view their props? Which guy do you favor in front of the other?
Both are great. It's like a 1A, 1B scenario. I honestly love the fact that Puka got ejected last week, and this is his time to show up, right? He comes back against the Vikings. He's awesome in that game, but doesn't score a touchdown. Last week, obviously, he gets ejected. Cooper Kupp has a big game. This is the time for him to be fully involved in the offense and score. So I like Puka over 67.5 yards. I like him for a TD. I like him at 80-plus yards at plus 142. I think this is a Puka Nakua game for the Rams. Last week was, weird stuff happens on the field, but I will certainly take him. It's not to say that I don't like Cooper Kupp tonight, but I want to see Puka get fully involved in the offense. I think it's going to be Stafford, Puka, Kyron as my top 3 options from the Rams.
There you go. Taking a look at the top props right there. Kyron Williams over 19.5 yards. Puka Nakua over 67.5 receiving yards, and an anytime touchdown from Nakua and Jonnu Smith. If I ask you one play of those 4 or something else, give me something interesting tonight to watch out on some of these prop bets for us, Tom.
I do like. Kyron can always be involved in the passing game as well. So I would say Kyron over attempts and Stafford over completions, maybe ahead of attempts, just because I expect him to be efficient. They want to get the ball. Puka Nakua doesn't have a deep ADOT. It's only sitting at 11.3 yards. So I want to see him get the ball, move the chains. And then if the Rams are out ahead and the offense for the Dolphins isn't moving, I do think we're going to see 100-plus yards from Kyron Williams.
22.5, the completions prop for Matthew Stafford. It should be a great game tonight to end out week number 10. And you'll see Tom Vecchio before Monday night kicks off on the pregame show here on Sports Grid to get you set. Vecchio, thank you for being here on this Monday. We always appreciate the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
We give you our thoughts on Monday Night Football next on TEL. It is time to finish out our breakdown and preview of the Monday Night finale for week number 10 of this 2024 NFL season. Live right here on this Monday on the early line. It's the Rams, it's the Dolphins in Los Angeles inside SoFi Stadium. The Rams a 2.5-point home favorite against the Miami Dolphins. Over-under stands at 48.5. DRS, let's just start with the game itself, its impact and importance tonight. The Rams a slight home favorite, less than 3. The Dolphins an underdog once again with Mike McDaniel as the skipper. Only 7-11 against the spread since he became the head man in South Florida starting in 2022. Only 3 outright wins. And although
look at that. Prime time DRS right now for this game tonight. So as Ben was setting up, I believe what he was trying to tell us here is the Miami Dolphins and the Los Angeles Rams are going to be a good game tonight. It's a 2.5-point line. But if we're looking at this game optimistically, it really points toward the Rams for me. If you're looking at the Rams setup tonight as the 2.5-point favorite, they're the better team. They're the team that still has some playoff hopes here. And the Miami Dolphins sort of careening off the road. Ben, the tough part tonight for me, honestly, is the fact that Tyreek Hill didn't practice all week. I don't think he's playing coy tonight saying, I just didn't practice and my wrist is going to be 100% healthy. Because as we talked to Tom, there's a difference between getting a handoff in the backfield and protecting yourself and trying to catch a laser beam away from you 20 yards away and then getting tackled and bracing yourself on the turf here. I'm worried about that Miami Dolphins offensive explosion if Tyreek Hill can't be the player that we think he can be here tonight.
Absolutely so, DRS, and he was that leading receiver for Tua and the Fins last week in Buffalo, yet to find pay dirt since week number 1 of this season, or in any, of course, of the 2 games since Tagovailoa's return. And Donnie, for the odds makers here on FanDuel, not to have the odds out yet for the wide receiver positions is a little bit concerning. Because, of course, the impact of Hill's either availability or absence then impacts what Jalen Waddle is going to be able to do. Jonnu Smith has been a consistent, really for any quarterback this year for Miami. I would keep an eye on his numbers. But again, the Dolphins, of course, the story of the season has been the head injury to Tua Tagovailoa and his murky future at times in his football career and in 2024. And because of that, Miami is 2-6. They have not looked great. They have looked better with Tua Tagovailoa back, but they are in such a hole. And again, Donnie, for the Dolphins, losing this game by 2 or 1 in covering means nothing. Losing this game by 3 means nothing. It's an outright win that Miami is desperate for. Only 3 outright victories in the 18 games now as an underdog with Mike McDaniel. Meanwhile, for the Rams, their season has been resurrected. 2 wins in a 5-day span. They backed that up with the extended mini bye last week on Sunday, going into Seattle and holding on in overtime to knock off the Seahawks. You heard from Dr. Chow, although there are still some injuries to pay attention to for LA, their delta, where they are trending, is so much more positive now than it was in the opening month of this season. And frankly, Donnie, that's why I believe the Rams are the right side in the correctly favored side of only 2.5.
And also, like, Tyreek Hill being injured or not at 100% is a massive deal. So then we usually say that, hey, Jalen Waddle's a sensational wideout, first-round draft pick, gets a ton of money and has that explosive ability. Did you see his last 3 games? Colts game, 1 for 11. Cardinals game, 4 for 45. Last week against the Bills, 2 catches, -4 yards. Like, this isn't what we've expected here. Is he able to just step in and be that number one if Tyreek Hill can't do that and maybe buying at a lower price? I'm not so sure of that. So I got a lot of information I need to dissect this afternoon, which a lot of it does deal with is Tyreek Hill playing or not and the effectiveness, which might come down to just the pregame and saying, hey, Tyreek's running his routes. He's catching the football fine. If I see that, I'm probably going to be back in on Tyreek Hill. You know what? Touchdown props over his yardage prop. But that's going to be tricky. Are they going to do one of those like, hey, Ben Roethlisberger in the playoffs like a decade ago against the Broncos? He hasn't thrown all week. He didn't throw in pregame, only to uncork bombs right away to start the game. I think we might be playing a little bit coy here on Tyreek Hill. That's what I'm trying to decipher today. But I'm not just immediately going to Waddle like, oh, he's been producing. He hasn't.
So if we're focusing then on LA, because a lot less uncertainty on the side of the Rams, Matthew Stafford, 1.5 touchdowns is his passing touchdowns prop. He has thrown for at least 275 in 2 consecutive games. You compare that to Tua Tagovailoa. You could look at the running backs, Kyron Williams, Devon Achane, or, of course, the wideouts that we know for LA. How are you approaching the Rams' perspective for Monday night?
It's got definitely Kyron Williams. If I think the Rams are going to be winning, which means extra carries in the fourth quarter, that plays into it. But the ability to hit a home run for Kyron Williams, I love. 83.5 is no cheap prop here. So you're basically looking at him getting around the central, which I think he can. If you're buying in on the Miami Dolphins, you want that explosive play out of Devon Achane. Can he get 7, 8, 9 carries and get 60 yards? Of course he can. But also the vulture touchdowns from Raheem Mostert. The one thing that you have to love about is you're not worried about that technically from a Rams perspective. The full bulk of the carries and the passing game is probably going to run through Kyron Williams as opposed to Achane and Mostert on that side. But if you are looking at Tyreek Hill, as we just told you, banged up and not performing in Jalen Waddle, maybe Devon Achane picks it up out of the backfield as well. If you said, Donnie, one running back that you love in this game, it's Kyron Williams. But Devon Achane does have the ability to score a touchdown and get a lot of plays tonight if we're down some of those weapons or some of those weapons are hobbled tonight.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You heard from Tom Vecchio. 5.5 is the receptions prop for Achane. Just how much he's going to factor into this passing attack for Miami should be noted. The Dolphins haven't been great this year. They are the 6th best passing defense. I think those numbers slightly skewed because Miami was trailing so much without Tua Tagovailoa. They were playing from behind, teams trying to run out the clock on them. Kyron Williams had scored in 9 consecutive games prior to last week. That did come to a close. And again, Donnie, when you look at Puka Nakua and Cooper Kupp, it's going to be hard to determine who that lead wide receiver is, and the odds makers having a difficult time as well. Look how closely tied those numbers are tonight for Kupp and Nakua.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's a great problem to have, as we like to say, because how many times you say, oh, I like Puka Nakua tonight. There goes Kupp, 9 catches, 114 yards and 2 scores. Nakua, 6 catches, 60 yards in those scores. But I do think Matthew Stafford is probably the big winner tonight. The one expectation I have is Matthew Stafford's going to be a top performer tonight, and 2 touchdown passes, that should be on the docket for us.
I like that. I like what Vecchio had to say about Nakua hitting Paydirt. I think Jonnu Smith makes some sense, and even Devon Achane. DRS, you'll have some time to cipher through this all of this information before NFL football in-game live game day tonight with Kevin Walsh and Joe Lisi. Enjoy the money line. We'll talk Thursday. More on the early line next.